Hey, what's going on? It's Dave Duford here at Final Expense Agent Mentor and Buy Life Insurance for Burial, where I help agents succeed in the final expense business and help people like yourself, perhaps, that are looking for some kind of information and on getting a policy to cover final expenses. So today's video is going to serve two purposes. Number one is to explain the benefits that a veteran receives upon their passing. Most of what we're going to be discussing is their passing that's not service related. So they're not actively in the military, they're discharged, and the question being, what does the VA actually provide? And the other purpose of this video is to train agents, maybe like yourself, who are wondering what exactly does our government do for our veterans who served as far as burial and final expenses. Now, the reason I'm doing this video too is I actually had a conversation with an agent last night, and he ran into several veterans who said, I'm completely covered, there is no worry whatsoever, sure I got my microphone here, and to pay any kind of out-of-pocket expenses. Now, if you're a final expense agent and you have even a cursory understanding, that is not the case in the vast majority of the situations that we see. For whatever reason, a lot of veterans just don't have all the information on hand and just unfortunately believe that their entire cost will be covered. The benefits that the government provides are very good, as you'll see in a minute, but they're not entire and conclusive and comprehensive. So again, the goal here is to explain to you in plain English using the websites that the VA is associated with, so you can see it from the official source, to describe what exactly is covered and to help you consider what you need to have on hand if you don't have some kind of coverage to cover the differences in cost. So what I'm going to do here is first going to start off with some averages on final expenses. I'm going to show you a breakdown from the National Funeral Directors Association. And what I'm going to do now is just flip this over to my screen. And if you'll join me here on the screen, you'll see this is the National Funeral Directors Association's website. And what you're seeing here are some statistics. These are just how many funeral homes are open. But what we want to see here are the stats as it's associated with the cost to be buried. Now, what you're going to see here are two different tables. You're going to see a 2004 table and a 2014 table. So a 10-year difference in time. And it's going to show you the average costs for each of these items that are customary for a burial, and then the same for a cremation. So if we can go ahead and look through this on your own time if you want to go back and review this and pause it, but these are all normal costs. If you get down here to the bottom with a vault, your average cost as of 3 years ago at the filming of this in 2014 was $8,500 and $8,508. Whereas in 2004 it was $6,580. And the price difference is a 30% increase over 10 years, pretty substantial. Same thing with cremation. Again, I'm just scrolling on down here. The cost is $6,078. Again, these are averages, and these are not, you may see better prices, you may see lower prices. But the reason that I'm showing you this, ladies and gentlemen, is just to give you an idea of what the official statistical compilation is showing us as far as what the average prices are. Now, it's of my persuasion as an insurance agent, whether you're a veteran or not, these prices can be higher and they can be lower in some circumstances, especially with cremations. You probably have heard of direct cremations that cost $1,000 or less in some parts of the country. That certainly exists. Whereas I've seen most cremations around $2,000 to $3,000, and that includes a wake and a service as well as the actual cremation expense. So I feel like some of these numbers are a little bit off, and a lot of it just depends, like you're buying a car. It depends on what you get, you know. If you want to spend money on the gold line casket with the leather interior, then hey, you're going to spend a lot more than the average. But if you get the simple and the basics, you don't have to spend as much. So those are the costs, and I wanted to start our conversation off so you can see what the averages are and then compare them to the actual benefits that you get. So again, I'm going to switch you back over to my desktop, and I'm going to show you what benefits the government pays. As you can see, we're on the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs website. I'm going to put this link below so you can see this yourself. And I'm going to go ahead and just briefly read over some of the information here. So the burial allowance for a non-service connected death is $300, and it's $2,000 for a death connected to military service. Again, the difference between active duty and not. And more specificity here, as long as the death occurred after 2001, September 11th, it's a $2,000 death benefit. And just for the sake of time and explanation, I'm going to assume we're going to use the most latest figure. So there are some in-between numbers here. If, say, someone passed away in active duty before September 11th, 2011, it would pay a different number, a little bit less. So for non-service related death, the VA will pay up to $762 towards burial and funeral expenses for deaths on or after October the 1st of 2017, if hospitalized by the VA at the time of death. So you have to be inside the hospital in order to take advantage of this benefit. Or the other option is you'll get a $300 benefit towards funeral expenses if not hospitalized by the VA at the time of death, and a $762 plot interment allowance if not buried by the National Cemetery. So to kind of wrap this kind of area up, basically what we're looking at here is you're going to get a $300 death benefit regardless of what happens, plus a $762 death benefit if you are buried outside of a national cemetery. So let's call it $1,000 and $1,062 is your total death benefit paid out to your family if you're buried in a non-military cemetery. Now that's just a death benefit payout from the government. And it could be more if you're hospitalized at the time of death. But again, as we'll get into, it's not a tremendously substantial amount. Let's continue on here. I believe there's a little bit more to cover here. It's all a function of the Consumer Price Index, so it should go up each year, adjusted for inflation. These are the eligibility requirements you paid for the veteran's burial or funeral. You can read the rest of this here by clicking on the website. Again, for the sake of the video, I'm just going to cover the basics, and then we're going to move on. So now we're going to go over and look at actual burial benefits that the VA does give you if you are buried in a national cemetery. And once we cover this, I'm going to take you back on screen with me, and I'm going to give you my perspective as what the kind of loose ends here that you need to be prepared for. If as you'll see in a second, as it's not totally comprehensive. Okay, so if you look here, again, we're back on the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs website, and we're looking at burial benefits for burial in a national cemetery. So again, reading this, burial benefits available include gravesite in any of our 135 national cemeteries with available space, opening and closing of the grave, available space, so you get the plot, the perpetual care, it's tended for and taken care of, a government headstone or marker, a burial flag, a presidential memorial certificate, and these are at no cost to the family. Now, if you're reading on here with me, the burial allowances is what we just covered in the last section. So, and this is extended for both spouses and dependents buried in a national cemetery, and they include burial with the veteran, perpetual care, and spouse or dependent's name and date of birth, death will be inscribed on the veteran's headstone at no cost to the family. So, again, to summarize here, you get the plot, you get the opening and closing, you get the flag, the marker, and a presidential memorial certificate. Notice, though, what is not covered with that. I believe you do get a vault. I did not see the vault mentioned, but most of the national cemeteries are going to have a vault in there. What's not covered is the actual casket, the embalming fee, any kind of transportation fee, any sort of decorations or flowers or services at the funeral home. So here's my point. If you're a veteran yourself, or if you're the spouse of a veteran looking for life insurance, as you can see here, this is not a comprehensive benefit provided by the VA. Now, it's really good, but it's still going to leave several $1,000s at a minimum to cover if you are going to be buried at the national cemetery. Now, the other thing, too, is that if you are cremated and want to be buried at the national cemetery, they'll treat this exactly the same. And in that case, this cost is much substantially lower, but there may be a little bit of cost left over. But definitely if you're buried, there's going to be a substantial amount not covered, as mentioned, like the casket, which can be a pretty large and costly component. So moving down here, making sure we've covered all of this information. I believe we covered yes, we did the benefits. We'll cover that up. And then last thing I'll show you here is just a little bit of information on the headstone. The Department of Veterans Affairs furnishes upon request at no charge to the applicant a government headstone or marker for the unmarked grave of any deceased eligible veteran in any cemetery around the world, regardless of their death or date of death. So you get the headstone for at no cost as being a veteran. So again, the conclusion here is that veterans do not have comprehensive and full coverage. This is very, very important. If you're in a position and you think you are, you probably aren't. The differences I've seen is if somebody actually has a policy that they picked up while they were in the military. My grandfather had a policy for $7,000 or $8,000. He served in the Korean War. When he passed away, it went to my mother, but it was a very small policy, and he had specifically had it in the military at that time and kept it for his entire life. So, but beyond that, those are usually the exceptions to the rules. And I'm cutting this video and doing this today because a lot of people just are misinformed. And I hate to see people who, unfortunately, don't have all the facts in order to make a good decision. Again, this is where a life insurance plan or a small burial insurance plan comes into place. You may be asking, well, how much should I have beyond what the VA is going to cover? In my mind, if you're a veteran, you're going to be buried. A $5,000 to $10,000 plan is suitable to cover any kind of differences left over. Again, a lot of that depends on your age and how long you have expected to live. If you're younger, you should probably have at least $10,000. If you're older, less would probably be okay, just because you're not going to be subject to inflation and prices going up nearly as much as somebody who's got 30, 40 years left. But you do need supplementary coverage. If you're going to be cremated, it can be a smaller number than that, but I think it's still necessary. There's always added expenses and things to manage that people just don't expect, and it's worth covering if you can do it. And a lot of the times, like what we do at Buy Life Insurance for Burial, is very inexpensive. We shop the most competitive carriers to get you the best quality of coverage at the most competitive prices based on your health and your age and those kind of factors. So again, I want to thank you so much for joining me today. I do hope that you enjoyed this quick educational video on how VA benefits work for burial and cremation costs. If I can be of any service to you, you can call me anytime at 888-626-0439. Be happy to do a quote for you for final expense coverage or any kind of life insurance. And if you're an agent interested in working with me, feel free to go to my website. It's feagentmentor.com. Send me a message and I'll be happy to talk to you at a later date. In the meantime, you guys have a great weekend and Merry Christmas.